Welcome to Hatman Strikes Back Daily Boxing News. According to Bob Arum, the Artur Beterbiev-Dmitry Bivol rematch might not happen until October next year. He said Turkey, who's a guy who loves boxing, wants to see a rematch, and I think the public would love to see a rematch. But again, because the Riyadh season ends in February, the earliest date for a rematch would be next October. I think there was a lot of pushback on His Excellency doing fights outside of Saudi Arabia and outside of Riyadh season. I think going forward, in order to tap into the large budget that they will have to do fights in Riyadh season in Saudi Arabia, which makes sense. So it may mean that each of these guys fight one more time against other opponents, and then for October of next year, they do the rematch. I think that is, from a business standpoint, the likeliest thing that will happen. Those are the words of Bob Arum. He made these comments on Dan Rayfield's podcast. Now, if what Bob Arum's saying here is true, and I don't know whether it is or not, but if it is, then it would seem that Turkey Al-Sheikh has been reined in a little bit. Riyadh season, I believe, runs from about September or October through to February. But of course, he's done fights outside of that before. The first fight between Usyk and Fury was in May this year, and the 5v5 was in June this year. But according to Arum, that's not going to be the case moving forward. They're going to stick more strictly to Riyadh season and having the fights take place in Saudi Arabia, not outside of Saudi Arabia. And that second point in particular will not go down well with boxing fans in places like the United States or the United Kingdom. But the United States in particular, because of the time difference between the US and Saudi. The time difference between the UK and Saudi is negligible, at least for the purposes of boxing events. It remains unclear how long the Saudis will stay in boxing and how long their big spending will continue for. As I always say in situations like this, as boxing fans, we just need to enjoy it while it lasts. In the meantime, I think that the Saudis made a good move for this last show they just did with Beterbiev and Bivol by introducing a little bit of their own culture into the actual show, because for the most part, it's been a festival of Western culture as far as the boxing shows go. I like the fact that, I'm not sure if you guys noticed this, but in between rounds, they were playing Arabic music. They had this Arabic drumming, and it kind of reminded me of what they do in Thailand. You know, when they have Muay Thai matches and they're playing the Thai music while the two combatants are fighting? It reminded me a little bit of that. Not that they were playing the Arabic music during the rounds, but in between the rounds. So I quite like that, and I think if they want Arabs to actually get into boxing more, they should make the atmosphere at these boxing events more palatable to them. Those of you who maybe haven't lived in the Middle East before may not realize that Arabs generally are actually really fun-loving people. They tend to be very gregarious and a bit slapstick and silly. They're very open to talking to strangers and stuff like that, far more than Brits are, for example. So as I say, they're very fun-loving people, but of course their culture is different. In Saudi Arabia specifically, they don't have all the alcohol and what have you. But if you could introduce more of the Arabic drumming and that type of thing and make the atmosphere a bit more familiar to them, then I think it will help. I don't necessarily think you need to have the raucous, drunken UK football stadium type atmosphere at every boxing show around the world. Again, going back to the Muay Thai fights, it's a lively atmosphere, but it's a different type of setup and a different type of atmosphere to what you get in the UK. Although I think there is drinking at those shows, as far as I'm aware anyway. The main point of this video is to consider the possibility that Bob Arum is correct and we won't get to see the Beterbiev-Bivol rematch for another year. Now, as you guys know, I'm not a massive fan of immediate rematches, but in certain circumstances, I think they are necessary. And this is an example, because the last fight was very, very close, razor close, which leaves some ambiguity about who the number one man in the light heavyweight division really is. I scored it to Beterbiev by, I think, 1 point. I couldn't argue with anyone who scored it for Bivol. But if they're not going to rematch for another year, then let's be real, this rematch might never happen at all, because Beterbiev is like 40 years old. Either one of them could lose. Are you disappointed by this news if it does indeed prove to be true? Would you want to see a rematch in, let's say, February? That would still be within Riyadh season. Let me know in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. I'm out.